Primo, primo, ¿dónde estás? Primo, primo.
Bienvenidos a la tierra de la sonrisa eterna. Welcome to the land of the eternal smile. My thing just got cut off. There it goes. In the heart of Central America, where the majestic volcanoes meet the Pacific coast, lies a country rich in culture, history, and mystery. El Salvador, a land of resilient people and vibrant traditions, is also home to a fascinating world of folklore and legends. From the mythical creatures that roam the countryside to the ghostly apparitions that haunt the colonial towns, El Salvador's folklore is a testament to the country's indigenous and Spanish heritage. In this episode, we'll delve into the stories of maybe La Llorona del Rio Paz, the weeping woman who haunts the river of the west, Esipito, the mischievous spirit of the forest, La Carreta Chilona, the ghostly cart that rides through the street of San Salvador, and also La Ciguanava. Join us as we explore the spooky and fascinating world of El Salvador, where the boundaries between reality and myth blur and the legends come alive. Vamos a descubrir los secretos de la cultura salvadoreña. Let's discover the secrets of the Salvadorian culture. And we're going to have a guest on today. It's going to be from the Los Primos podcast. We're going to wait for them for a little bit while I go over some of the other stories that we have from El Salvador. So let's start off with the Black Knight, El Caballo Negro. I'm going to read a couple things. So put this here. I actually don't even have my headphones hooked up. That is bad on my part. He could already be on and I would never know. Bam. Okay, good. I'm set up now. So, the Black Knight is a being that causes panic to anyone who imagines the devil appearing to them is scared to death since they imagine him as a monster. But as you know, the devil is an intelligent demon. It would be absurd for him to appear as an ugly animal. He would present himself in the most attractive way possible, which was be a knight. They say that a long time ago, some ranch owners would suddenly disappear and some would appear dead, and their pastures with nothing but grass inside. So stuffed like a scarecrow. I don't know why that took me so much to think. It's like my brain doesn't work sometimes. They say that when bad luck surrounds some people or for life reasons, a man becomes desperate, he would call upon the devil for help. Without waiting, a thick whirlpool formed, and a very elegant rider was seen on a powerful horse with shiny saddles and a large cape. His business was to buy weapons. He pleased the wishes of those who called upon him in exchange for his soul. He offered men, women, money, luck, among other things. This one is said to give people 7 years to enjoy everything he gives them, and then he comes to take their souls. That's bad. Like, that'd be horrible. I wouldn't want to enjoy 7 years and then poof, be gone. Close some of these windows out. I don't need all these windows open. There you go. So that's not fun. So I invited people. I forgot. Okay, cool. I thought I jumped out completely. There you go. Studio chat. It lets me see if there's anyone here. Okay, cool. Send a message. Got me a Coca-Cola. Like I said in the last episode, Mexicans drink a lot of Coke, and I hold to that stereotype. I do drink a lot of soda, especially Coca-Cola. It doesn't have to be labeled out. I ain't sponsored by them. And it's inverted. I would have to revert the camera. I don't know. Let's go over another story. Because what we're going to talk about would be La Ciguanava. Actually, I want to keep that other one up to see if he's heard of any of these. He says he wasn't too familiar, so we'll see. There you go. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. There it goes. Translate to English because I don't want to work that hard. No one on live? Okay, cool. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to tell you about El Cadejo Negro y Blanco, which is a similar story that I told about two different dogs, one white, one black. It was also featured on a cartoon, Victor and Valentine, on Cartoon Network. So let's see, Victor and Valentino, Los Cadejos. So it was an episode. Quick little, like, Stinky was the name of the dog. Is one of the Cadejos that appears in Victor and Valentino. It's voiced by D. Bradley Baker, Stinky, but its name is Stinky. Let's see. Like I said, all these things actually make it onto pop culture. Like, our traditions, our history, no matter what, well, no matter what, where you're from, Mexico, Salvador, Colombia, Portuguese, Brazil, Portugal, I meant, not Portuguese, Brazil, everywhere. All our stuff inspires everybody, and it gets put onto cartoons. It gets put into media through either cartoons, movies, shows. There's something that comes from our beliefs. Let's see. Stinky, by its name, is stinky and unclean. It has the power to deceive whoever talks to it. It can turn the eyes of whomever glances at it red. In Los Cadejos, it deceives Victor several times, even convincing him to jump into the caldera of a volcano. He can also shed his fur, causing him to reveal his skeleton. Hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's going on? How are
I'm
you
right
doing
here, man.
today?
Sorry I'm late.
It's all
I'm
good.
good.
I was reading off some of the stories and things that made it into pop culture from Salvadorian, Hispanic, and different types of folklore.
There's a lot of it, man. There's a lot of it.
I forgot to silence my phone, and it is going crazy right now for some reason.
Oh, let me do that too before I forget. Cool, man. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I've listened to a couple of your episodes. You do some really great stuff. I love your shows, man.
Oh, thanks, dude. We try to I don't know. Are we already recording and stuff? Like, is it part of the show or not?
Yeah, but I can cut whatever
Yeah.
you need out. I don't mind.
Oh, no worries. No, well, the show, if you've heard of it, it's about our viewpoint on everything, right? Pop culture in general, because it's always white people telling us what movies are good, what books are good to read, right? Like, we have fucking voices. We have history and folklore and experiences that we want to voice, right? So if someone can listen to our show and get into the geekiness of it, be it whatever, man, from anime to comic books to horror to even, I have an engineer. One of our primos is an engineer. He's all about politics and science and all this. So it's like, cool. Like, our voices need to be heard in all facets. So that's why I said, fuck it. Like, and it's always cool because Latinos in general, Latino people, man, like, we have a history of, sadly, like, stepping on each other instead of trying to help each other out, And so I looked at it as, we're all primos, man. We're all from different parts of the world, but we're all connected. We're linked up, And so I said, primos. So we're all primos. So my primos podcast became that, and we talk about everything from indigenous people, because my wife's indigenous from Mexico, and like her mom and grandma spoke Nahuatl and all that, and so she has more of a connection with the natives here in the U.S. with the indigenous people here. And like, we've got connections with them and other people from all over the United States, and we've met Salvadorian people from and it's not just like, you don't have to be Latino to listen to our show, right? But it's about our voices, man. Like, believe it or not, and it's not a secret, it's fucking cool to be Latino right now, right? Pop culture,
Yeah.
like, oh shit, let's grab shit that we like and let's try to make it our own. But why can't we do that with ourselves? Like, hey, let me take my stories, my culture, and geek out over it,
Especially things like when the show like the Mayans came out, and then on Cartoon Network it was Victor and Valentino, and
That
it
show
was
was
just
good, man.
slowly emerging from our culture. Everything was slowly coming out. It was starting to be the more acceptable to be Latino. I'm like, it's always been us. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Because
it's
like
always been us.
that's part of like what I like to talk about. I go from the paranormal side, and I draw lines from where our stories begin and end, and where like American culture will pick it up and turn it into their stories, and the similarities between the different stories from El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, and like everything that's all similar. I'm like, we're all one people. Our stories are exactly the same. The only difference is where it's happening.
Yeah, honestly, man, we're all connected. We're all interlaced. And the problem was that we had too much division, and it still happens sometimes, right? So we'll get it to where I grew up. I'm old. I'm 40 years old. So I grew up in LA in the 90s. My parents came here during the Civil War in the 80s, and so I saw that division between Mexicans versus Salvadorians, and then like everyone's looking out for each other, and they're all going up heads up against each other, right? And when it came to like those stories, but we started realizing like, hey, a lot of the same stories you're telling your kids to scare them at night are the same ones that I was told. A lot of them are very interconnected. The same beliefs, the same legends, they're still there, because you forget and you learn as you get older that the whole, what is it, everything from all the Americas, they're all connected, So just because we're in the U.S., this is where we need to join up and kind of link up and let's celebrate that instead of having to be so, hey, that's a Mexican thing, that's a Salvadorian thing. Like, yeah, there's that, right? Because you have pride from where your country and where you grew up and your roots come from. At the same time, though, hey, dude, that's fucking cool that this Aztec, Mayan, Nahuatl culture can still connect us in some way, you know?
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that your wife is indigenous from Mexico.
Yeah.
I got some indigenous roots from Mexico too. I don't know what they all are exactly because it's lost to me. Those records, like my family can only go back so far, and then we can't
Yeah.
find anything else. But whenever I do the like different episodes, and it's based on like ancient beliefs and more ancient gods and deities and their legends, I cannot say any of the names worth a crap.
It's hard, man. I have a friend, David Bowles. He's a professor in South Texas. He's an author as well. David Bowles has written tons of books regarding the subject matter. He's literally, if you need an expert, David Bowles is an expert in Nahuatl a culture. You know, we've had him on the show, and he's the one that can pronounce it. He was even writing a rap in Nahuatl for a while. Like, I give him a hard
What?
time because, yeah, like for reals. He's well versed in it. He's a professor in South Texas. He is, oh man, let me read off some of his books, dude. Like, he literally, like, he's written the Chupacabras of the Rio Grande, The Kingdom Beneath the Waves, the Garza Twin series. I don't know if you heard of those books. If you read a lot, like he's done a bunch of books like the Clockwork Curandera series, Tales of the Feathered Serpent, which is a lot of like people use that book as like a jumping off point to write a lot of books, you know, especially in the Mayan culture, Aztec culture. He even talked about like the hero twins and what they represent, right? Like all this stuff that is within the culture, the Maya Mesoamerican culture. Like he can speak it much better than I do, and he was even doing TikTok lessons here and there, like talking about the language and what they mean. And he would debunk people that would be like, Aztecs weren't a real people. Like they never called themselves Aztecs. Like there's tons of stuff online where like he has to like debunk it and fight it. So it's cool to know those guys, you know. But I can't. I know some of the phrasing, but I'll butcher it. To be honest with you.
I'm looking them up right now to see if I can find anything.
Yeah,
Does he go
one of his book. His name is David Bowles. Bowles.
LES?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does he go under David Bowles on TikTok?
Yeah, that's him. He has like a book called They Call Me Güero. They call her Fregona. He translates stuff from English to Nahuatl. Like he's all about it, man.
I think I've seen some of his videos where he calls out a different TikToker who always like posts videos and he's like, wait, that's not correct. Like he doesn't like call him out like to bash him. He's like,
No,
that's not correct. This is how it really happened. And like, and everyone in the comments is like, that dude always says that he'll never like respond or listen. But I'm like, and all his information is accurate. I'm like, I think I've actually used some of his stuff as reference or
a lot of
ideas
people
to
do, man.
some of my episodes.
He's a great writer. He knows a lot of the lore and folklore. Like he's the reason he taught me the whole idea of how, you know, going through the different levels of the underworld, like you shed your skin and your bones and like you leave the whole world behind. Like he kind of, his books talk about that stuff too. Like in certain stories that he tells, like he has a couple of romance like books out that are dope that involve like, you know, it's like a time travel thing with a conch and stuff. It's crazy, like, but it's fun. And that's why we try to celebrate Latine people, man, like just the culture and everything. So yeah, I'll butcher some of the names, but I'm familiar to an extent. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how I do, you know?
So what do you know about some of the Salvadorian folklore?
Well, in El Salvador, like, there's a bunch of couple tales we were told when we were kids. I mean, the biggest ones are like El Cipitio, La Ciguanava, Cadejo, like carretera de una carreta like a cart, like a wooden cart.
Yeah.
That would make a squeaky noise in the middle of the night. It would be like taking souls, you know, like you would be walking home late at night and you hear this like screeching and like creaking and like old wooden tires on cobblestone kind of like sound down the road.
Yeah.
And people would say like, oh shit, like escucha el sonido, and they'd run home because they're worried they're gonna get taken up by the spirit. But In Salvador, like you kind of have to go back a little bit and kind of understand like a lot of these stories are interconnected. Now with like we're talking Central America, right? Guatemala, Honduras, like Salvador, like all these cultures were so interlinked because at one point, remember, Guatemala was the capital of all Central America. It was all one big country at one point, till it all got divided up into smaller countries. So a lot of these creencias and stories all interlink. So the biggest ones I mentioned, right? Cipitillo, La Ciguanava, and El Cadejo are the biggest ones. And how the story goes is that La Ciguanava was this beautiful woman, and her name was like Sihuahue, I think is what it is, and it meant like beautiful, gorgeous woman. And she had like enamored Tlaloc's son, the god of the sun, and she got pregnant by him, but then she was unfaithful. After the baby was born, she was unfaithful to him, and she would leave the baby, abandon the baby. The baby would just eat like cenizas and soot from fireplaces and like just starve, a baby, almost the young child would be like left alone to suffer while she was out gallivanting, poniendo los cuernos, right, to the god.
Yeah.
But eventually he finds out about it, and they curse her to become this monstrous horse-faced woman. And at the same time, the child, they blessed it with eternal life. But that child also became like a spirit or a ghost or what have you, entity that would haunt the roads, and there'll be a story here for him. But that child became very like mutated. He had like a big giant belly. His skin turned gray because of all the ash he ate, and his feet turned backwards. Instead of being facing forward, they would face backwards. And he would basically punish people that were bad to kids, like someone that just abused their kids, treated them bad, or took advantage of kids. He would come after them. And the Ciguanava, her legend goes that she's always found like near like a cliff or a location that has water. There's different tellings of it, and it's always men being super attracted to her. Like she's a beautiful woman, bathing in water. Sometimes she's either holding like a golden cántaro, like washing her hair and combing her hair. As soon as they get close to her, she transforms into this hideous monster, and
Yeah.
basically they kills them with fright or throws them off a cliff, or they fall off a cliff. There's apparently a way to fight her, that if you like pull her hair and scream like some phrase to her or whatever, she'll let you you can run away from her or whatever. But La Ciguanava is kind of the big monster, the big scary in El Salvador, because the interconnected stories, because Ciguanava is the mother of Esipito, which is Esipito still roams and does his thing too, helping kids and hurting people that hurt kids. He wears a super big hat and looks very like a gnome, if you will, like very big belly, like kind of like a long nose, just kind of look very deformed because of how he was starved, But the gods gave him eternal life as a kid, so he's always like a small, like gnome-looking person. And El Cadejo is pretty much the idea that God sent this white dog, this spirit, if you will, that it was a dog with blue eyes that would watch people on the roads, making sure that they were safe. But then the devil said, fine, I'm sending my dog. And it was a black version of that dog. And it was the opposite. And so there's always this dicho in El Salvador, like, when you run across somebody, you always, or sometimes they run into you, go, oh, well, ¿quién te trajo? Who brought you, right? Was it the white one or the black one? Because you don't ever know. It's el negro o el blanco, because are you a blessing or are you a curse? And so the dog would just be like this dark, ominous, giant dog that would just grow in size. He had the shape of like they said like a deer almost, kind of like a deerish looking dog but red eyes. That he would just come out in the dark and like chase people down and kill them, take them away. The white one would save people that were lost or in trouble. The dog would save them, make sure they got somewhere safe. The Cadejo is kind of like an ongoing thing in El Salvador. And La Carretilla, that's the one I mentioned earlier. It kind of has a little bit of a foot in history, because there were tons of massacres that occurred in El Salvador, not just during the Civil War, but of the indigenous folk as well. There was the invasion of, when we got conquered, the Pipil tribes that were there were murdered and massacred in droves. Then, when slavery started coming into the country, people from like the coast of Africa and Congo were coming over. They didn't want black people there after slavery was abolished, just started murdering and massacring anybody that had dark complexion, and dark included the indigenous people that were there. And so they said that during those times, this story goes back that far, where they would hear stories of this cart that would pick up the dead bodies and dead souls, if you will, and transport them to the other world. And so it kind of started going around also back like during the Civil War in the 80s and the late 70s, same thing, that the story kind of came up again. Like it would go like, oh, we hear this story long ago, then it kind of dulls down, and then another massacre or whatever happens, and then oh
Then
shit,
it come back.
it come back so it's cyclical. So that's always been around there, and those are the things that I remember.
It ends up turning into an omen. Whenever there's something bad happening, you'll see the cart coming in.
Yeah, like
or
a sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a squeaky sound of like a cart, like kind of over cobblestone. That's what I've been told. There's tons of little stories that I remember being told as a kid. But what's cool about it is that when I tell people these stories, they're like, "Oh shit! Like wow, I always heard about La Llorona, and I always heard about this and the chupacabra and el cucuy
big
and all
bad.
this."
Like I call them the top three big bads is gonna be chupacabra, el cucuy, y la llorona. Those are the ones
what is it?
always ever heard.
La lechuza, whatever, like the witch and all that. Like, so, okay, cool. Like, but I never knew more about the culture. My mom and dad would just barely mention it, and it was so like it wasn't brought up so much that it became very taboo. I'm like, oh shit. Then you know when someone says like, oh, I've heard so many stories, but when you don't hear it a lot and someone brings it up here and there, you're like, oh shit. And when they whisper about it,
intriguing.
You're like, oh wow, is this like legit? Like, oh, okay, let's see what happens. And the one that always got me, dude, I don't remember the story very well, but there's this certain tree that grows in El Salvador. I forget what it's called. But this tree, apparently, it's like it's a specific area of Salvador. And in this tree, at a certain time of night, only children and only deaf people can see a flower grow at a certain time of the night. Like a flower will actually bloom.
Yeah.
Okay, and only they can see it. And apparently, if this flower were to be plucked or picked up, it has to be wrapped in a white cloth, and then you're challenged by a demon, saying like, if you want to keep this, I'll grant you a wish, but you need to fight me in battle. And they have to fight for like this is old story that I remember to being told as a kid about this flower. And if you see it as a little kid, don't touch it, don't go towards it, leave it alone, because you'll have to fight a demon. So those are the ones that I remember the most.
See, I've never heard like that's a specific one to El Salvador. I've never heard that one before, and this is something I've always delved into since I was a kid. So I've heard a lot of stories, and I love hearing stories that I've never heard before.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out what that is, man. I'm gonna look it up the tree name, but yeah, that's what I remember.
And like all the stories that you've said, all I've actually talked about, but from the Mexico side, there's like an equivalent story in Mexico to all the ones you've said, except for that last one, because that one's specific to El Salvador. We even have una carreta de la muerte. We have one of death, to where if you see it, someone's gonna die. It may not. It's usually whoever sees it, that's who it's coming for. If you hear it, you have a chance to get away. But if you stay and you see it, that is it. It's a cloaked figure. He gets down and he'll go into the houses. He'll go into wherever they're at, and he'll bring out the soul. And he's just going around town picking up the souls of the departed and taking them with him. And that was actually one of the stories I did in one of my previous episodes. And I've also talked about, like I said, I've talked about a little bit about all the ones you've mentioned, but from the Mexico side.
That tree is called the tree de amate, A-M-A-T-E. So árbol de amate or flor de amate. That's the tree. It's like a white flower. It's a beautiful looking flower too, but it's like cursed. Apparently.
Yeah, there's an act. Yeah, I've seen a similar flower to this. One of my friends had a picture of it. He's from El Salvador, but I never knew. Like, I think his mom or somebody had just a picture of the flower on their table. I was like, that's cool.
You should ask her, like, hey, you ever heard this whole thing about la flor de amate and a demon or something? Watch, if she's old school enough, she may have heard it.
Yeah, they came from El Salvador, so I'm pretty sure they know the whole story about it. I never thought to ask because growing up, I didn't know. I was like, oh, cool, a flower. It's an interesting
You
picture.
never think about it, but like how important those images, right? The flowers, like everything from La Flor de Muerto, right? Like my wife, she'll attribute it to, oh, well, this is what we use it for. We use it to decorate this, and the smell, El Dia de los Muertos, because we didn't do El Dia de los Muertos like they do in Mexico. We
Yeah.
don't do that in Salvador. So now, yeah, because of Coco and all the pop culture part of it, sure, and everybody can do it, right? But I never grew up with that type of tradition. We would go and clean las tumbas, right? Like clean everything up and dress them up or what have you. But that's pretty much it. Like we never set up altares like that I grew up. But that's more of a Mexican thing, I guess. Not to assume, but at least that's
Oh
how I
yeah.
grew up.
It's actually not even like a fully like everywhere in Mexico thing. It's only like deep Mexico because my family's from a border town, and we really did like people really didn't do that too much. You would see a couple people have altars and some small celebrations, but it wasn't like widespread the way that
Yeah.
it is now. Because, like you said, from like pop culture, like the movie Coco, it's a lot more people celebrate it now because they've been introduced to it. So now they look into it more, and they're like, "Oh, this is part of my culture. I should do
But is it
something."
okay? Let me ask you then, right? So is it cool though? Like I look at it this way. I'm from Salvador, you're from Mexico. If I tread on that line, are you guys more like, hey, that's our shit? Or is it more like, it's cool, hey, go ahead, celebrate it, it's all good. As long as you respect it, we're good, right?
Yeah.
Because then the other side of it is you go to fucking HEB and you're buying Dia de los Muertos plates. You know what I mean? Like everything's become commercialized and kind of, monetized by the white man. And then we kind of sit here and go like, well, fuck, man, like that's not really what it's about. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I feel like as long as it's respectful, I know it's going to be commercialized no matter what. So I've accepted that. Like I even got pictures of my Instagram where I bought the plates from
Yeah.
Costco. I'm like, these are cool plates. I'm like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
But as long as people are respectful, I'll gladly tell them everything I know, and I'll learn. Like for this podcast, I learn about a lot of different cultures and their traditions, and I'm like, this is some of the best information I've ever gotten. I'm like, I have to read more, and I'll reach out to different creators. I reached out to y'all. I reached out to Latinos Against Spooky Shit. I don't know if you've seen him on
Yeah,
TikTok.
yeah, I've seen him on TikTok. I follow
Um,
him.
I've had Shining Nathan on. He's from South Texas. I believe he's from San Antonio.
Have you hit up
Um,
Susto? He's fucking great, man, from the Susto podcast. I
no,
met
I'll
him a
have
couple
to.
times, and we're friendly online.
Yeah,
I met him at a in Austin. We had like a Latinx Pop Lab. Shout out to UT Austin there, not UT. Yeah, Austin. Yeah, Professor Latinx. He's a big name down there. He does a pop lab where a lot of creators come in from comic books to just creators and content. And he was there. We talked, we chatted up, and he did a Ciguanava episode. He's fucking fun, man. I watch his stuff, and he's a blast. He has he's even done like some live shows. It's pretty cool.
yeah. I pulled him up. Like he's been on TV and everything. Like
Yeah, he's
he has
cool,
a lot
man.
of references.
He gets right into it. He's a great creator too. I bought a bunch of his stickers somewhere, and yeah, like Susto podcast. Check them out if you haven't. Everybody out there,
Yeah,
check him out. He is
I
awesome.
I would love to
Aiden,
reach out to him.
yeah, Aiden, he's dope. He's fun. He's super like reachable, and every time I've like talked to him online and stuff, we chatted. And plus, go check him out. He's in Texas, so if you guys are in Texas, he's usually up and down Texas. So
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna reach out to him about that.
yeah, he's fun, man. Really cool.
But yeah, like I'm always about pushing for our culture to be more known about. Whether if personally, like I said, if it's commercialized, I understand it's already going to happen no matter what we do. So I've embraced it, and I'll teach people as much as I can, and I love telling stories. So I'm all for it as long as it's respectfully done. And like the movie Coco, the movie Encanto, it was really well done and well accepted. And even on TV growing up on like PBS, they had Maya and I can't remember it was like Maya and something, her and her twin brother, and they did a bunch of stories
Oh
like that. They had an abuela.
yeah, I remember. It was Am I tripping? Like, nah, it wasn't. shit, I used to watch a lot of PBS. I remember Maya, but wasn't it it wasn't Stories of Virtue? Some shit like that? I don't remember. Like, it was a
Uh,
talking buffalo, if I remember.
I know which one you're talking about. I don't know if that one's part of it.
Maya and Miguel?
Yeah, Maya and Miguel.
Yeah, I remember
They're
them,
about just
yeah.
two Latin kids growing up in the city.
Yeah. I mean, like, what else is there right now? Los Casa Grande, right? And
Yep.
they made a movie, which is cool because they have a Salvadorian character on there, which was dope. But yeah, like Los Casagrandes. Then we had, like you said, earlier today, what was the Book of Life is dope. Like all these like iterations of films and shows that are out there. I love it, and we need more of it. But I feel like it's a lot of like mainstream America will look at that as like a novelty, as opposed to like, hey, give us the same fucking respect you give Percy Jackson. You know, like
Yeah.
why don't you give Percy Jackson the same love you give Percy Jackson? Believe in our stuff. You know, I'm like that's there. It's ancient. It's people believe in it. The Greek and the Roman gods. Like, okay, these are the gods of Mictlan. You know, like
Yep.
let's do that. I don't
And
know.
it should be held as under the same regard as, because those are our ancient gods too, not just. But like I said, it's going to be commercialized, and people aren't going to understand until they're told about it. So it is going to be a novelty for some time, just because right now the way they're being introduced to it is through cartoons.
But isn't that how it was with like anime, right? Like you watch Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and all that, and you kind of get hooked on it. Oh shit, I know. I'm gonna name every Pokemon. Like I have
Yeah.
a friend, you know, the creator, his name is Gonzalo Alvarez. He is developing a graphic novel called Pollo Man, and he did a card game called Nawali, and it's literally like a trading card game where you play online, not online, but face to face with cards of using Nahuatl language, everything from animals and weapons and items. And he is basically that's his argument. He's like, why is it that we can name every fucking Pokemon, but we can't even name half the stuff that we should be growing up with in the Mesoamerican culture, you know? And
Yeah.
so he's trying to bring that in the forefront and to hook you so kids can go, oh shit, like the same way we obsess over, you know, being kawaii, right? Like you can fucking, you know, talk about me being Latino, Latine and enjoying that stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I was saying too. Like that's how they're gonna see it. It's gonna start off as
Yeah.
the novelty because of the introduction, and then from there, it's
Yeah,
gonna
you're right.
grow once it hooks more people. It'll
Yeah,
once
you're
it
right. We
hooks
need more
more,
of it.
that's when it grows. But yeah, that's like I said. A lot of these stories we have similarities in Mexico, but we also have some that are like just specific to Mexico. Like you have the floor we have, ours isn't as like beautiful of a telling like that of a fight between good and evil to get like to for the flower. Ours is like one of ours that's specific that I've only seen in Mexico, but it's also kind of spread to a couple other countries, is La Mano Peluda, which is
I don't
just,
know it.
it's a disembodied hairy hand. So the story goes that it was the owner of a pawn shop in Mexico, and he was just a very spiteful man. Like his whole thing was greed. He just wanted everyone's money, and he'd give them like ridiculous, like he'd take whatever people had and just keep as much money as he could. He became rich. He had rings and jewelry, and people would literally curse him on the streets, like, you know, I hope your hand falls off, because all the gold jewelry he had on his fingers. Like, I hope your hand falls off, you know, and all this other
Oh wow.
curses. And then when he passed away, his hand fell off. As the legend goes, his hand falls off, and they put it in the casket with him. They bury him, and at night, the guards of the cemetery see his hand come up and like take off. So now, if you're, this is what's the story to keep kids like from getting up in the middle of the night. So now, if you step foot over the edge of the bed, La Mano Peluda will grab you and drag you under, and that's the last anyone will ever see of you.
Have you ever
If you,
experienced any of those things, man? Like, you know, people say like, "Oh, I had an experience with La Llorona chased me," or like the fucking the lechuza was knocking on my door, or like shit like that. Like, I've never experienced anything like that.
those I haven't experienced, but I've had like, I've seen some similar, like I've seen some things, but I haven't experienced like the main legends. Like one of my friends says his family went camping one day and they were, camping near a river. He said there was La Llorona. He heard it. And he said he ran to the truck, locked himself in, left the rest of his family out there to survive on their own. He was like, I'm safe.
Yeah, man,
But
like it's crazy. Like I've always been like, I think back to myself, like I've maybe been around stuff and never like paid mind to it. Like I wasn't. Maybe it was just as a little kid you block stuff out, but I think we've all grown up with like folklore and legend and death and being part of our culture that we don't really scare easily.
yeah.
Or maybe our parents fuck us up so much as kids that we're like, when we're older, we're like, this ain't nothing, man. Like my mom used
Yeah.
to pull my feet at night just to fuck with me, like,
Yeah, like I said, like
like
La Mano Peluda was so we didn't get out of bed. And like eventually I was like, man, let it take me. I got to go get something from the kitchen.
I
But
don't know. I
like,
hear stuff like that, of people getting like haunted or like cursed, and like I've seen people like go to the fucking El Lindo Masonico or whatever. I grew up in LA. This fool would be on TV with a bone through his nose, like fake shit with feathers and smoke, and like, yeah, come see me. I will fucking cure you. Like people go line up for that shit,
yeah.
Like I believe there's truth in that. I'll be real with you, like, como decir, like I better not fuck with it just in case. Like let me just leave you alone. My dad, he works still. He's been there for almost 30 years at a cemetery. He's been working at a cemetery in Inglewood, California. So there was a story one time that um years ago, I remember my dad was like sick all the time, like just sick or like just always with a cough, or like he had really bad like eyes. His eyes got like really bad. He has colored eyes. So like dirt and stuff gets in his eyes, it get really bad. Anyways, and stuff started happening at home, like bad shit, like stuff would break or stuff was just weird, noises. And for whatever reason, my mom ended up going to some lady, and then they tell her, "Oh, in your house, there's dirt from a cemetery." And my mom's like, "Well, yeah." And my dad used to bring his work boots home,
Yeah.
from work, and just dump his boots in the hall, whatever. And apparently, like that dirt brought in these bad vibes, and so like ever since then, my dad would just leave his work clothes at work. Like he would change out of the locker room and drop his boots off because that shit would be coming home with him. So like
Yeah.
stuff like that, I remember.
And in my family, we've all experienced stuff. On my dad's side, we have visions. On my mom's side, there's one of my tias was an exorcist,
Oh,
and
cool.
there's my
Is
mom
it cool or is
sees
it like, oh shit, like, oh
like
right,
oh shit situations. Yeah.
okay,
My mom, she can see and communicate with spirits, which is
for real, for real?
craziest thing I've seen. Because like one time I was at her house, and I was in the guest room. I was sleeping there one day at night, and you hear little kids running up and down the hallway, and it's me and my two younger brothers. But my younger brothers aren't like little kids. They're 18, 17, 15. They're
Okay,
not
yeah.
little kids, but you can clearly hear like the laughter of children running up and down the hallways. And then you hear like my mom say, "Hey, go to bed." I was like, that wasn't me. And then asked her in the morning about it. She was like, "Oh yeah, every now and then, just some little ghost kid they just run up and down the halls. Just gotta tell them like an adult, go to bed, and they'll cut it out." I'm like, "You said that too casual. Like, I think I'm gonna go back home."
No, it's cool. Like I think it's cool. I think it's real. I don't. You can't disavow any of that. Like I'm like,
Yeah,
I think it's real, man. Like, hey, it exists. Like some people can communicate, and I think the rule of thumb is like, don't go looking for it. That's me.
yeah,
That's me. Like, don't go looking for it. If it finds you, you deal with it, but don't go looking for that because you're gonna find something.
yeah.
Even if it's on your own. Like you trip yourself out. But you're gonna find something.
Yes. If you go looking for trouble, it's gonna find you. Whether you're looking for something good or bad, you're gonna stumble across something.
Yeah.
And most often than not, it's going to be the bad because demons and devils and whatever you want to call them are always looking to get the upper hand on somebody. And
For
like I
sure.
said, my aunt, one of mis tias in Mexico, did exorcisms, and one of the stories that she told me that I like, that's one of my stories that I like to tell people, um, is she got a phone call from one of her like nieces and nephews to go over because there was a shadow figure like looming over a baby's crib. So she was like, I'll be there in a minute to go, exercise the house. And she just got in her car back from the shop, from the mechanic. It's everything. This car should be running like new. So she gets in her car and she takes off. And as she's driving, it starts sputtering, like it wants to stall. So she puts her hands on the dashboard and she starts praying. And every time she starts praying, it goes, like it starts taking off. She stops. She takes her hand off the drive and it stops. It tries to stall again. As long as she has her hand on it praying, the car keeps going with no issues. And she gets there, exercises the house. She says like you could see him in the corner, just a black spirit looming over everybody. So she went, did her thing, and everyone was okay.
Damn, that's crazy, man. But like stuff like that, I believe because you can't make that up. It's like who would think to sit there and go, yeah, the car would stop and I pray on it and it moved and moved, like shit like that. Like I can't make that up. Like it's like stranger than fiction, right? Like it's like, oh, that has to be real, you know? So yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy being around that.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff, but nothing major. Like my aunts, my cousins, all that stuff. I haven't had their experiences. Like one of my cousins, he had a dream or a vision of my dad getting out of jail because he was in prison for a long part of my life, and he had a dream that he gets out, and everyone was like, "No," because he's serving like an extended term. He just got out like a few years back, but they're like, cool. No, he's getting out. And then one day they got a phone call like that we were releasing him, but it was only for like a short time because it was a clerical error. But like my cousin was like, "Yeah, I told y'all this was gonna happen." I was like, everyone was
no
like,
matter how it happened, it happened.
Yeah, it happened. Like no matter what, he was right. Either we're like, no one understood how he was right.
I know. I think it's just like I was talking to my wife and my kid the other day. We were like, because I just got over like a little bit of a summer cold, so I apologize if I sneeze or something. But and I was telling him like, man. Yeah, I was telling him like, man, I think I was too doped up. Like I started going down this like my brain started stacking on itself. Where he's like, what do you mean? And I go, you're fucked up. You're either too high on something or just far gone sick. Where you start thinking you created the universe that you're in. And he was like, what? And I go like, yeah, like I literally thought myself up, like I stacked it up to where like all this shit that's happening or is happening is kind of connected to the other thing, to me. It's all break in my brain and I'm making it all up in my head.
You were drawing lines.
I was drawing lines and I go like, yeah, there's something about manifesting things. And then you think, hey, did I do that? Is that deja vu or did I do that? Or what connection do I have that made that feel like I had some kind of power over that? I don't know. Maybe it's just me and my sickness, but like, there's something there. I help you say, oh, no, como dicen, like, don't say his name, you'll summon it, right? Or don't speak it because you'll make it happen. But I think there is something with that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's power in a name. If you say like certain names enough, you can manifest things. That's also why for Catholic exorcists, it's if you know the demon's name, you have control over the demon, and it is manifestation. And you might even be able to do that if if that runs in your family, that might be true. You might be able to manifest certain things.
Maybe.
Like I said, my cousin can have visions of the future. My other side of the family can exorcise ghosts. I only see shadow figures, and and I've never seen anything from the future. I'm like, if I could see anything from the future, give me the lottery numbers or something.
Right, for real, man.
It doesn't have to be the big one. I don't need the big numbers, just enough to make something by.
Just a piece. I think I've gotten to that point where I don't know, like it's so unknown that I do kind of catch myself like, nah. Like stop thinking about that. Stop, like thinking of. It's also when you worry, right? Like I'm a worrier, so like if you start thinking about shit that could happen. And then you start almost building it like the perfect scenario, the perfect storm. You're like, let me stop. Because I feel like that shit's going to happen because of how in detail that shit looks to me. Yeah, like it's going to happen. I'd rather back the fuck off, because the fear of manifestation, like, some people say it cures people, like your brain, you tell it long enough that you're not sick, you're not sick, or you tell it you are sick. You do get sick, So
The power of the
true.
brain.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that might be true. You might, like I said, you might actually be able to do stuff like that. Like the world will never know. It'll always be a
Never.
mystery.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that it could happen, it could not happen. And on my side of the family, like I said, it's just weird. It skips a generation or something. And for like manifesting things, like I'll go and I'll say something stupid, and then we'll turn around. We're like, where did that come from? Like, what happened? And it like things appear that people talk about. I have one quick question because this is something that plagues me to this day.
Sure, man. I'll try. I don't know. I'm not an
What
expert.
is your opinion on duendes?
I never grew up with duendes, like that whole idea of a duende stole your socks or some shit, Like my wife, she'll say, "Oh, fue un duende." I dated a girl. She was from Mexico, and she's like, "Oh, fucking duende did it, man." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like the only duendes are like the cartoons, Like I never grew up with that stuff. So for me, I guess they could exist, but I don't have a real foot in that race, Like I'm like, that's how I look at it.
Like I said, for me, growing up Mexican, this is something that's plagued me because I'll literally put something down and it's gone, and I'm like, those duendes quit messing with me. Like I hate this so much. Like
Is that what it is?
They're considered tricksters of the house. Is one of
Okay.
the stories is that they are house demons or house gnomes, where as long as they're happy and appeased, all they're gonna do is play tricks. Worst, if they're not happy, that's when the bad stuff starts happening. That's where they turn into almost like a poltergeist situation.
But friendly.
Yeah, but they're friendly. As long as they're happy, they're friendly. They could be malevolent if it's pushed that far, but majority of the time they're friendly.
The only duende I growing up was that Héroes de Silencio song. I don't know if you know Spanish rock, but Maldito Duende. It's like a song called Maldito Duende. And I'm like, damn gnome? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But like I watched the Borrowers right on TV when I was a kid, like stuff like that. And like, I guess I don't know, but maybe my head was more like, my dad was kind of a punk to me when I was a kid, so he would be like, "You lost it, you fucked up," I'm like, "Where is it?" It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
I put it there, Like maybe there was a one that I could have blamed as a kid. Maybe.
Like I said, yesterday I lost my wallet 3 times back to back, and one time it was in the chair that I'm sitting in now, and I searched the whole house. It was in my chair, and another time it somehow managed to get under the bed when it was in my pocket. Like I was nowhere near that part of the bed where it should have been under. And I don't even remember where it was the third time. I found it and I was like, okay. I put it in my wallet. I don't even know where my wallet is now at this point, actually.
Fucking damn duende, maldito duende, man. That should be the outro for your podcast today.
Yeah.
No, it's a trip. Like those beliefs and folklores. I think there is a world behind this veil, right? Like I think that it exists. I think there's something there. I believe in spiritual world. I believe in afterlife. I believe in aliens. I believe that there's so much to this world that we'd be too egotistical to think it's just here. That it's just us.
Yeah. Speaking of aliens, I actually have a UFO story.
Okay, shoot.
That I experienced, but this was when I was like a little kid in elementary, and I remember it in detail. We were out in the playground, and the way the old school was built, I even know how the old school was built. It's been refurbished since then. So we were out in the playground, and it was concrete side. Behind us would have been the 2 portables, and then the main school in the front, and then the big concrete, and then the playground to the right. So I was on the concrete part going to like behind the portables because there was a small little field there where people played soccer. And I looked up, and you can see this huge disc coming in, and it was just going in circles. Like you could see the outer windows were spinning, but the inside, whatever was inside, was stationary. And then it just takes off. And every time I tell that story, people are like, it could have been a helicopter. I'm like, I know what a helicopter is. The whole thing doesn't spin. Helicopters is just the blades, but everyone's like, it was just a helicopter.
Aliens are real. The government admitted it, right?
Yeah, they finally admitted it. First time they said that, I was like, ones. I knew it.
And then Mexico had those weird tiny ones, apparently, that were like this big.
That one was crazy.
that they're real, man. Like, let's be honest here. Like, people always tell me, like, oh, because they're like, oh, you believe in God. You're like, yeah, I do, man. But God ain't like this, man. God's fucking enormous, like
Yeah.
the big God, because there's gods and then there's the creator, like you can't just our brains cannot grasp how big and how vast that the creation is,
Yes.
and that's why I always say like egotistical to be so small and to put God in a box,
Yeah, and like I said, it's also those lines from various different cultures. You can draw similarities through all cultures. A lot of cultures will have gods, like deities, and
Yeah,
like in the Greek mythology, it was the demigods.
demigod, yeah,
And the way I draw this line is like in Catholicism, it was the saints, the apostles, and Jesus. And then in like um, Hispanic culture, it's the different gods that created the different parts of the universe. And then there's always that one creator at the very top.
yeah.
And like it goes, the top god goes by many different names. And Catholicism, it's literally God. And what's it called in Greek mythology? It's Kratos, the one that created Zeus. Below him, like there's always
This
somebody
Astros
there.
was like the
Yeah,
atmosphere, and then the Yahweh, and we have the different cultures, and that's why it's always
that,
great when you can have that conversation and
yeah,
people can have the peace of mind to understand, hey, you can call yourself whatever you like, but with Buddhists and Catholics, Christians, Native Americans, like indigenous people, like a lot of the same beliefs and a lot of the same like church or structure you want to call it, right? Like it shares a lot of correlations because it's the creator. That's how I look at it.
yes, yeah. That's why I always tell people like we could be a lot more intertwined if we shared the stories because everything is so similar. The
Yeah,
only
for
one
sure.
I personally believe is not similar would be like depending on the type of Buddhist people are, because Buddhism is just being at ease with everything. There's
Because I
the
mean, if you look at like the human beings, right? Because it would be in the same level as Jesus and Siddhartha, or the Buddha and Jesus, and like there's even what Confucius, just kind of
yes,
like different avenues to get to the enlightenment, salvation, whatever you call it, and
yeah,
there's a lot of correlations there. And sure, we differ, right? Like even the Bible itself has so many translations that contradict each other and whatnot. And even within the same culture, people pick and choose what they want to grab from the book or from the word. And then that can be twisted and perverse. It all comes down to a personal outlook. And if we can have the conversations, share the stories, connect those lines, like you said, and just accept that, hey, man, we can coexist. Like, that's what I
yep,
say with like Latinos, right? Like in general, like there used to be a time where it was like, man, Salvadorians and Mexicans didn't get along. That was
yep.
just the
That was
way it was.
just the thing. Yeah,
That was just
it
the thing, and but now times have changed, and you kind of realize like, hey man, like that was kind of ridiculous. We were kind of blind to it, but different times, different situations, and I'm
yes,
hoping that with this internet and the people and everybody's a fucking button away, like that things will mesh better.
yeah. Like in the early like 60s, going through the 80s, the only introduction that like Mexicans had to Salvadorians was on the news. And it was all
Yeah,
mainly like, oh, MS this, MS that. All I ever heard growing up about Salvadorians was MS. If you see one, they're gonna kill you and all this other stuff. And then before I even knew it, like when I was in high school, like one of my friends, he was Salvadorian, and I never like knew the difference. I'm like, yeah, cool, you speak Spanish like I do. That's
we had the code switch in the 90s, man. I had to like be like, yeah, I'm Mexican too, like because you was the only Salvadorian kid in the neighborhood until all
yeah,
the Salvadorians came in, and you're like, oh yeah, well I'm them, like I'm part of that crew. And so yeah, like it was funny, like at one time, now it's different, but at one time El Salvador was known for MS-13, pupusas, priest that was killed in the 80s, and Alvaro Torres, a singer. That's it. Like all
yeah.
El
That
Salvador was known for.
like I said, growing up, all I knew about El Salvador was MS-13. That's about it.
Yeah.
I was like, and then well, like I said, once I got older and introduced more into the culture, I was like, we're all the same. Like, what was all that craziness about? But it's all the it's the media, the dramatization, and what they choose to feed us from different places, and that's all we know. But like you said, now with the internet, everything's just a click away. The not just information, but misinformation and things like that. And we can actually
It's true.
find out for ourselves what really is how people are. And I
Yeah.
think that's also what helped merge more Hispanic cultures together.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why, like, it becomes so mundane because my kid's growing up in this era where he's always had a screen in front of him, right?
Yeah.
And he's 14, going on 15 right now, and he's Mexican and Salvadorian, right? And there's always, like you said earlier, like I remember one of your podcasts you had mentioned, he was listening to it with me, I think one of the most recent ones. He's like, oh, I'm an Osabo kid, you know? And I told my kid understands Spanish. He'll respond here and there, but you would classify him like that, right? Because he is. I grew up we like to say, well, most people like to say, oh, I'm a first generation because I was born here. My parents came from Salvador, right? But we kind of, if we do that, I try to make it a point of saying, listen, you're second generation because your parents came here, they struggled, they built a place for you. They're that first generation that crossed over here. So I like to say, at least in my family, we like to say we're second because my parents came here, they did everything they had to help us jump off, right? But when it comes to just the way the world is now, everything becomes so mundane, so regular that you ignore the fact that it's that fast to find a real answer. You can reach out to somebody and go, hey man, you're online, I'm online, let's chat like we're doing right now. Like, hey, like
Yep.
there is that avenue where you can don't just sit there and talk shit. How about you reach out and be like, hey, let's have a conversation. Like, I'm curious, man. Like, how is it living over there where you're at right now? Oh, it's shitty, it's bad, or you know what? It's actually pretty good. Salvador right now is a fucking cool place to be, right? Bitcoin and all that. Like, everybody loves Bukele for some reason, which I still think there's some nefarious shit going on there, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Because politicians. But right now, El Salvador is a whole different place. Now people are like, oh, I want to travel there. I want to go check it out. I want to go slide down that rainbow slide. I'm like, man, like, it's easy to just look at one image, but until you dig, that's what I always tell my kid, don't just believe the first thing you see or read, man. Like, dig, dig, dig. Like you said, there's misinformation, there's information, and there's facts, right? You just got to dig in to find the right answers. So I'm hoping that it doesn't kind of go over his head, that everyone can kind of go to the web and books and go back and search and actually find out the history of stuff and learn, you know?
And yeah, like that's just how things need to be. Is we need to learn a lot more, and it's more accessible now. There's no reason people should be as closed minded as a lot of people are nowadays. So, and I go over this majorly in the episode I just recorded last night because someone on TikTok said something on misinformation, and for some reason, it just got under my skin. It got under my skin so much that I fleshed out like a 6 to 8 page script over this subject, and I talked about it. Like I said, it's an episode that's about to come out on Monday, and it goes over slavery in Mexico. Because somebody on TikTok said like, they're like, "Oh, bring y'all's asses here, Mexicans. Y'all had slaves, and y'all owned slaves for 300 years." And then there's a historian called the Masked Historian, and he has a luchador mask, and he tells history. And he was like, correction, they were brought to us. We had nothing to do with it. We were actually enslaved at that point too.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the way that the first person said it just triggered me so much. And I did research over 3 to 4 centuries of Mexican history and how the what's considered the third race, which would be Afro Mexicans,
Yeah.
got lost to history because a little like recap of everything that I talked about in that episode was basically Spaniards came over here. They brought disease and war and famine to conquer, and the Mexican indigenous were just locked in their little area. So they had no contact with anyone else. So when the Spaniards came, they brought disease. That made a bunch of people sick. People started dying. They started conquering, fighting war, that wiped out a lot of the
Yeah.
indigenous population. And at that point, they were like, well, who are we going to get to build our stuff? Whatever was left of the population, they made them go to work. And then they were out. And then a priest was like, we're treating the indigenous people of this land harshly. Let's bring in the slaves. And then that's when the slavery was brought in. And as soon as Mexico became an established country on its own and we kicked out the Spaniards, within 20 years, 20 or 30 years, Mexico abolished slavery and outlawed it completely. And then just everyone just lived as they were. And eventually it got so mixed and intertwined that they forgot about the African ancestry in Mexico until 2015, when Mexico actually included it onto its census report, asking at any point does your history, culture, or tradition identify you as African? And people were actually checkmarking it because now they were looking into themselves.
Yeah.
And when all the numbers came out, people were like, what is this uptick in Africans in Mexico? Is it people immigrating here now from like the Congo and different places in Africa? And it was like, no, they were already here. This is just something that people are finding out about themselves in 2015 when all the 23andMe was coming out and everything. So
Yeah.
people were
Yeah.
discovering that they had a mixed heritage.
I mean, the Afro Latino is a real thing, right? That's the
Yep.
issue. Like, and you can search online, man. You can go down a rabbit hole with that stuff.
Yeah.
But in Salvador too, like my complexion, I'm passing, man. It's my complexion. But my sister is darker, man, way darker than me. And it's just it'd be that way sometimes, right? Because like in El Salvador, like I said earlier on the show here, there was a massacre of indigenous people and people of black descent and the slavers that were here because they wanted to kind of elevate about like the Spaniard and the colonizer, right?
Yep.
Like during the 15th century, like. But the reality is, there's plenty of like colorism still happens, right, within its own country and own race, what have you. But that for Latino, man, like that, like you said, it's been forgotten, and then you bring it back, and people are like, "What? How is that? How is this?" And then talk about not being, que se, no soy de aquí ni de allá. Like you're not from here, ni from over there. You're kind of in this whole another bubble, So for real.
Which is also like there's a saying from Mexico. We're more from like American-born Mexicans. Like no matter where you go, there's always a Mexican, and that's basically because just we were taken everywhere by the Spaniards. We were brought everywhere by other cultures, and that's just how it worked. There was a story that recently came out where an Olympic athlete tried to compete for her country. I can't remember what country it was, but she didn't qualify, and she kind of like they told her she couldn't do it, and so she went to Mexico because her mom was Mexican.
Yeah.
And then so she went over there and competed for Mexico, won gold, and everywhere you go, there's a Mexican, and it just somehow she was part Mexican, and boom, Mexican. It's our cultures everywhere, whether it be Mexican, Salvadorian, Guatemalan. We're all everywhere, no matter what.
We're all primos, man. That's what I was telling you. Like we're all connected. We're all interlinked somehow. Like yes, erasure is a fucking issue, for real. Like you don't want to lose. You don't want to. What is it? When it comes to assimilation, it's scary because the world changes and you have to adapt to where you live and what you're dealing with, right? And code switching and things like that. But assimilation is scary because you still want to hold your culture. You still want to, hey, I want to define who I am and where I'm from because it's not exactly like yours. But there's a lot of similarities that we can share on. And I think a long time ago, me and my primos were talking. We're like, look, man, like for us, it's like a mosh pit, right? Like a social mosh pit. Everybody's bumping each other around, but there's room for each other, right? It's the safest place you can be is in a mosh pit. It's in the mosh pit itself, right? Be amongst your people, be amongst your primos. You can bump and bruise, but you're never gonna. You don't have to assimilate, but you can be together. You can exist as a group. So that's always the way we look at it.
That is a great way to look at it too. And in the second to last episode I just put out, I discovered something that I kind of knew about, but not really. Was that there was Japanese Mexicans?
Oh yeah.
And I never realized that, but I always knew that like there had to be because there's too many Mexicans that have those Asian features. And when I did that episode, I discovered that there were Japanese and that immigrated to Mexico. They fought alongside Pancho Villa. They were part of the liberation movement. And then when the war happened, they were persecuted against because they were Japanese. But even after the war ended, they didn't leave. They were like, we get it. You were protecting your land, and they just stayed and just became Mexican. They didn't leave.
No, I mean, there's a writer who's a good friend of mine, Hector Rodriguez III. He's out of here in Dallas, and he writes a book called El Peso Hero, and it's pretty well known. And he wrote one of his arcs was, I think it was called like El Capitan or El Comandante, something like that. Chong, about a Mexican Chinese. It brings up that story in his book. One of his books, one of his arcs. El Peso Hero is kind of like a Superman, but from here in Texas, like in the border towns, you know. But in this one, I forget the story. It was a few years ago. I don't know if I have the book to grab real quick, but he mentions that, and that's my first understanding of it too. Is like there were, Chinese, Japanese, living in Mexico that were part of the culture, that were part of the struggle, and he mentions that in his book too. So I would look that up if you're interested, just to kind of reference it. El Peso Hero, and
I got it already pulled up, and I see the it looks like a cool comic or
yeah, man,
graphic novel.
Yeah, it's a comic book, Real Bravo Comics, and Hector's a cool guy. He's a teacher in Dallas, and he's doing comic books on the side as well. He does a lot of stuff with like wrestling with Master Republic, a lot of lucha stuff. We had a Comic-Con in June here in Dallas, which is free every year, by the way. Everything from Latino creators, Latino comic books, luchas, it's free. It's called Texas Latino Comic Con.
Where? Out of curiosity, where are you based out of?
I'm in Fort Worth, man. I'm like 10 minutes from the Top Golf in Fort Worth.
You
like
are
I'm downtown.
down the street from me.
Hey, man, they went that far.
I'm in Arlington.
That ain't down the street, fool. That's like a 30-minute, 40-minute drive down 20 or 30 or something, man. Like
in Texas, that's down the street.
Nah, man. How come all the homies tell me they live all in Dallas and Allen and McKinney and all that shit over there? And I'm like, come to Fort Worth. They're like, that's like the other side of the world. And I'm like, yeah, it feels that way. But Arlington ain't that far. I used to work in Arlington when I worked for retail. I worked by the off of 20 over there by the mall. What's it called? Parks Mall?
Yeah.
I think it's Parks Mall. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in Fort Worth, man. I've been here in Texas for going on 20 years, 19, 20 years. Yeah.
I don't know why, but I thought you were located out of Houston. I think in like one of the episodes I listened to, you said something about Houston, and in my mind, I just stuck, and I was like, oh, must be from Houston.
Austin. We're in Austin a lot.
Austin.
Yeah, we're in Austin a lot. I have a primo out there, one of our co-hosts, producers, I should say. He's in Austin. Another co-host named Kevin Garcia. He's a teacher as well as a comic book creator. He does like a lot of panels. He travels all over Texas, man. Like he's everywhere doing panels. They're in Austin. Elia, my co-host as well, at Spice Illustrations. She is an artist and a Twitch streamer, and she's in Dallas. She is a great artist. She's actually developing a magical girl comic book called Princesa Taco. So like Sailor Moon, but with Latino culture and like jokes and fun stuff, man. Princesa Taco. She's working on that book. I don't know. I have a cool connections here in Texas. I didn't grow up here, but I made my home here, and I've had some good people I've connected with that really have opened me up to talk to people like you and other creators and other Latinos in the industry, and just kind of be able to be a cool like conduit, to spread the information to whoever wants it. Because what really matters at the end of the day, man, it's like, what is it? It's not me. It's the thing we're trying to promote, which is primos and the content and our voices, and that's what it's.
That is very true. That's, like I said, that's for me the one thing that brings everyone together. Everyone has a scary story, so that's like I said, from what I've seen and discovered, and from what I've learned, and from what I've heard growing up, all our stories are the same. It's just the only difference is yours happened over there, mine's happened over here. That's it. Other than that, it's almost the same stories.
Yeah.
With the exception of like a few things, like we have La Mano Peluda, y'all have a flower. Like it's just random different stories that are just that y'all created versus what we created. And then there's the main ones that everyone knows. No matter where you go, everyone's heard it. Like, oh, we have like La Llorona over here. Like, oh yeah, we have La Llorona too. It's everywhere. Yeah. There's connections, and people are more connected than they realize.
For sure.
So, if y'all ever do an episode over anything paranormal or anything like that, I would love to come on and talk about it. Or if y'all just want to have me on for whatever reason, I'm down too.
Yeah, man, for sure. You're welcome to come on. I've always been open to talking and having people on because, like I said, it's about getting our stuff out there, right?
Yes.
Like, let's help each other out, no matter what. Like, I remember starting this thing out like years ago. I've been doing this for 7, going on 8 years, and I've had some great opportunities because of people that pulled my hands and say, "Come on, you got to come this way." Boom, made it happen for me, or just giving me the shot. Like, hey, just give me the shot. Like, just talk to me for 30 minutes. You never know. And I've been able to talk to like directors from movies and like work with like comic book artists and creators, be part of like some cool stuff. I'm writing a comic book for a comic for Scout Comics called Chispa Comics. It's like the Latino, comic book universe that's being built, and a lot of the people that I've mentioned on the show today and that I'm connected with are writing for this book. It's called Chispa Comics, and just going from there, man. Like, so yeah, whenever you're able, man, come on. We've had people talk about horror. It's that time of the year. We have a lot of those shows. We have a lot of fun, just discussing kooky, crazy stuff, and whatever else you want to talk about, man. There's always something there, and I'm glad that we got to talk, man. I know it was like a back and forth a little bit, no, but we got it figured out. So
Yeah, that's how it always works. There's always going to be a back and forth no matter what. But in the end, we're like I said, we're all the same, and like you said, we're all primos. That's exactly how it is.
yeah, man, for sure.
Where can everyone find you at the bottom? At the end of the thing, I'm going to put all your socials so people can find you there. But if you want to say it here, this is the time to do it before we cut out.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Freddie, Primo Freddie on the socials, but at My Primos Podcast, that's where you find me and the cast. Check out myprimospodcast.com. That's our website for all our information. We have some highlighted videos there for you. We're on YouTube. We're on all the socials. But just reach out. We're all about the Latina voice in all forms of pop culture, and we want to be part of. We are already part of that zeitgeist, but we just want to make sure you understand we're all primos. We're here to support each other, have fun, and just check us out at My Primos Podcast.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, and I look forward to talking to you another time again. Like I said, I didn't say this, but whenever I have somebody on, I try to do a couple people within a year. I haven't been able to do anything this year because I was sick for a little bit, and then I got some medication that knocked me out for a little bit of time. So
Sure.
I'm trying to get back into the swing of things and trying to get more co-hosts on. And if I can get at least 1 or 2 more people, I'll reach out to you again closer to the end of the year.
Yeah, man.
And I'll do a roundtable. Like last year, I had a roundtable with, like I said, with Shiny Nathan, Latinos Against Spooky Shit, and a couple paranormal investigators, Kukui Paranormal, and we did a roundtable over one of the big bads.
I mean, I don't know what I'll bring to the table. Like, I'm more on the creative side, but definitely, man, whatever you can bring me in, if I can bring something to the table, by all means,
Everyone brings something to the table. It's just a cultural thing. Everyone brings something because you'll have a viewpoint that other people wouldn't have. Same thing
Cool,
with me.
man.
I'll have a viewpoint other people won't have either. So thank you so much, man, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, man, for sure. Have a good one. Cuídate.
You too. Bye. And with that, we're gonna cut out. That was Freddie from My Primos Podcast, and I will see y'all next time. Stay spooky, everybody.